Today's review is a bit unconventional. The e-bike industry is in a funny place where there are tons of e-bikes getting a bit long in the tooth and newer gen models are on the horizon. So in other words, a lot of elite, but soon to be old models are about to see some serious discounts. So today we're reviewing the Specialized Turbo Levo Gen 3 model, a bike that first debuted in 2021. But in this review, we're going to be answering the specific question, should you snag the Gen 3 or hold out for what's next? Let's dive in and answer that question in today's review. Hey e-bikers, Griffin here. Welcome to Electric Bike Report. We're your go-to source for e-bike testing and analysis, and we've also got our once-a-week show for industry news, Q&A, and trail system highlights. Make sure you're subscribed to see it all. So it feels like a bit of an insult to call the Turbo Levo long in the tooth, as this bike is still as relevant as ever, but it is going on 4 years old now, which means it's due for a new edition to come out soon. When will that be? No idea. Specialized likely started cooking that up as soon as the Gen 3 came out, and there are no details just yet as to what the Gen 4 has in store, but today we want to focus on what the Gen 3 comes with, how it rides, and what the impending discounts mean for buyers. Specialized has numerous different configurations for the Turbo Levo. Ours here is specifically the 2023 Comp Carbon. I want to start off this review by first highlighting the major things that will stand out on this bike, regardless of which price tier model that you're looking at. The overall frame design is excellent and it is crazy adjustable. For starters, there are 6 different sizing options to choose from, so it's easy to find your right size, but the geo itself is tremendous. In all honesty, any EMTB from a major player in the industry will have sound geo these days, but Specialized R&D is something you can feel. Every fraction of a degree in millimeter of tubing feels purposefully thought through, and it creates a ride that feels both stable and responsive, and frankly better than most. Whether you're all about carving through corners or barreling through chunky downhill terrain, the Turbo Levo delivers. That's also in no small part thanks to how you can adjust the head tube angle by up to 2.5 degrees and adjust the bottom bracket by 7 millimeters up and down too. Next, this bike has fantastic handling. This is a mullet setup and our carbon frame weighs in at 50.4 pounds, which isn't bad at all for a full powered EMTB. But with shorter chainstays and a wheelbase, along with the mullet, it just feels poppy and playful on the trails and more agile than similar full-powered rides on 29ers. And speaking of power, the custom Specialized 2.2 motor is among the most powerful on the market, but what sets it apart is how smooth and intuitive the power delivery feels. It builds speed naturally and tackles steep climbs with effortless and almost mind-reading control in high or low cadence scenarios. It utilizes its 90 Newton meters and 565 peak watts of power really well. All right, now let's go through the rest of the spec and geo of our test bike, but just remember that ours was a 2023 Comp Carbon build in the S4 frame size. It looks like a few components have been swapped out since we got ours, and I'll shout those out as we go. The MSRP of our bike is $8,999, but pricing starts at $5,499 with the alloy model and climbed as high as $15K for the S-Works models. But that's full MSRP. Make sure to check our link for current pricing. The Levo has a flip chip and other adjustments for tweaking dimensions. I'll just stick to the basic measurements, but remember things can be altered to make the ride overall more steep and trail friendly or slack and better on the downhill. The bike's head tube angle is 64.5 degrees and the seat tube angle is 76.2. Again, our size S4 frame has a reach of 477 mil with the stack at 635. The bottom bracket height is 350 millimeters and the chainstay length is 442 mil on a 1,255 millimeter wheelbase. Standard battery size is 700 watt hours, with some older and less expensive models opting for a 500 watt hour. Our drivetrain is a SRAM Eagle group set. It's the GX single-click trigger shifters with 12-speed gearing. There's a 32-tooth chainring up front with a 10 to 52-tooth cassette in the back. And spinning the chainring are Praxis alloy cranks that are 160 millimeters. Now the wheels are Specialized 29 alloy, and they are paired with 29 by 2.3 inch butcher tire in the front and a 27.5 2.3 inch eliminator tire in the back. It has a 150/160 suspension, the fork is the Fox 36 Rhythm, and the shock is the Float X Performance. Our brakes are SRAM Code R 4-piston hydraulics on a 220mm front rotor and 200mm in the rear. It looks like the 2025 models are now running Mavens, which is a nice upgrade with better power. The saddle is a bridge comp, and it's on top of an X-Fusion Manic dropper post. Now ours is 170mm, but the travel ranges from 125 to 190 depending on which frame size that you get. The handlebar is an alloy 800mm wide bar with 8-degree back sweep and a 6-degree up sweep. We have added deity grips to our bike, but standard are Specialized trail grips. The left side has your control pad, and the right side has the shifter. The color display integrates into the top tube really nicely, and it has a sleek overall look. So that's definitely a lot of bike, but next let's do a little bit of a deeper dive into the motor and battery. Okay, look, the Specialized 2.2 motor goes toe-to-toe with anything on the market. Its weight is pretty low at just 4.9 pounds, and it provides up to 400% assistance. It's a 250 watt nominal with 560 watts of peak power. It has more torque than most at 90 Newton meters, but it wields it masterfully. Now let's focus on the torque for just a moment. One of the motor's standout abilities is its low cadence torque. So picture a scenario where you're starting out in too small of a gear. Most motors won't give you enough power because you don't have enough RPMs. Or worse, some torque sensors will detect the higher effort that you're pushing and overcompensate by surging forward with too much power. And that gets dicey if you're pedaling uphill. But the 2.2 motor doesn't really do that. It just ramps up smoothly, making it great for getting moving from a near standstill or delivering just the right amount of assistance to finish out a climb. Now, in comparison to some of its peers, Yamaha motors tend to be punchy at the start but taper off, and Bosch motors can be slow to engage in low cadences before delivering a lot of power all at once. The 2.2 motor here is really kind of the Goldilocks scenario, it's just right. But its strengths don't stop at low cadence scenarios. Power delivery remains smooth and consistent throughout. There are no unexpected surges, and the controlled application of power shines brightest on technical terrain, making rock and root-filled climbs more manageable. There's also plenty of top-end power. We haven't encountered a reasonable hill that the Turbo Levo couldn't handle, meaning fewer stops and less hike-a-biking. Just more time riding and having fun. A unique feature of the Turbo Levo is a micro-adjustment power levels that you can execute on the fly. Most EMTBs offer basic low, medium, and high settings, with some including an auto mode that adjusts automatically. The 2.2 motor has similar presets with its Eco, Tour, and Turbo modes, but it also allows riders to fine-tune power in 10% increments via the control pad that you can adjust mid-ride. Now, it's not a necessity to use it, but for those who notice and appreciate small differences in power output, the fine-tuning is a great tool to have on the fly, with the ability to pop into the app and further tune things there as well. Now, a built-in benefit for this motor is in its predecessor's failures. The previous 2.1 motor had a few notorious durability issues, but Specialized made sure history wouldn't repeat itself. They reinforced the internal components with stronger, wider belts, making them more robust, and several years in, this 2.2 motor has held up well, showing no widespread reliability concerns. It appears Specialized successfully addressed past issues. The bike runs on a 700 watt-hour battery, and unlike some full-power EMTBs where the down tube looks excessively bulky, the Turbo Levo integrates its battery cleanly until we hit the bottom bracket, which is, well, a bit of a chunk. It's beneficial for keeping weight low and centralized, but its look is a bit polarizing to say the least. It's a bit of a win for handling, but opinions on its aesthetics remain divided. Now, one of the few complaints we have about the bike boils down to its charge port door. Now, it's not the charge port itself, mind you, where you actually have a pretty tight seal, but it's hidden behind a door that's on the flimsy side, and its location next to the crank is easy to encounter issues with it. Be cognizant of it and you're fine, but it's a snap hazard if you're not careful. Now, beyond those quirks, every other aspect of the motor and battery are great, with the motor being one of the best combos of power and smooth engagement that we've pedaled. Specialized keeps things minimal with its top tube color display. It's a pretty unobtrusive yet easy to read interface. The screen provides color-coded indicators for Eco, Trail, and Turbo modes, along with a percentage-based battery readout, your speed, and a few other metrics that you can sort through. Now, there are two things we loved about the ecosystem here, and those are, again, the on-the-fly tuning and app customization. The stock 3 power settings worked well for us, but riders who want finer control can adjust power in those 10% increments mid-ride by long pressing the control buttons. And different trails call for different levels of assistance, and tweaking power output without having to pull out your phone is a pretty unique benefit. But man, the app takes customization to another level. The 3 power settings have 3 overarching power profiles, universal, racing, and battery friendly, that you can choose which best suits your appetites or goals. But you can also, of course, manually adjust the 3 power levels how you see fit to fine-tune overall power output and engagement levels to your personal sweet spot. There's more useful things within the app, such as enhanced security options, heart rate monitor synchronizations, and trip planning tools. And a really unique feature lets you set a desired ride distance, and the bike automatically regulates power to ensure that you have enough battery to complete it. Now, it's not quite the same as an automatic power mode we've seen on other motors that will move from, like low to high power settings as needed, but rather this one does a better job of making sure you have enough in the tank to get you to the end of the trail. So say you want to cover 50 miles in a day. Let the bike handle the power management, and you can focus on the ride without fear of having to hoof out the last few miles on a dead battery. Since this review takes a slightly different approach than most of our other reviews, we are examining an older bike here after all, we thought it would be fun to change up our usual range test. So instead of running it at max power on a mixed difficulty course, we opted for a couple of runs on more realistic conservative power levels while training on our local true grit course. So in eco mode, the Turbo Levo covered 51.92 miles and climbed over 5,000 feet of elevation while staying in its stock power configuration. And when we ran the test again in trail mode, with access to a little bit more power, it managed 39.43 miles on a single charge. Now that's solid mileage for a high output motor, and we suspect that it would still reach close to 30 miles if ridden exclusively in its max power setting like we've tested other bikes. The feature I talked about where you can program the miles that you want to get, well, we tested that out too on a different 50-mile ride. We found it a bit conservative with power at first in the early miles, but once the system calculated that there was enough battery to complete the ride, it noticeably upped the output in the second half, making the total 50-mile ride feel easier by cranking out more watts. Overall, it's a handy tool for riders planning longer adventures. Each EMTB that we review is put through 2 different hill test locations. The first is our standard test for every e-bike that we review, the infamous Hellhole Trail, where everything from EMTBs to beach cruisers gets a turn. It's a 1/3 of a mile paved multi-use path with a grueling 12% average grade. The second is the Water Tower Climb, an EMTB exclusive dirt trail spanning 0.86 miles with a 5.5% average grade. I'm gonna kick it over to Justin now to show you how it did on both tests.
Okay, so here we go on Hellhole with the Turbo Levo. I've got it in turbo power, and to be honest, I kind of debated on whether or not I wanted to do this hill test here or out, on an actual mountain bike trail. And so I'm gonna do both, but Hellhole's just been such a good hill to test the power and the torque of the motors. And the mid-drives usually struggle quite a bit on it. I mean, you hear me talking. I try to go at a pace that I could hold for a little bit, but still talk with people. And that gets challenging on Hellhole with the mid-drives. But so far, to be honest, I mean, we'll have to see the results. This motor feels fairly significantly more powerful than a lot of the other mid-drives we've tested, from like the commuters and those types of bikes on Hellhole. So yeah, well, again, we'll have to see the results, but so far it feels really good up this hill. On your left. Thanks. All right, we are out at our hill climb for the EMTB hill climb on the Specialized Turbo Levo with that Brose 2.2 motor, and we are in turbo mode. As with all hill climbs, I'm going to try to maintain a consistent output and just get a really good feel for what the motor can do. I'm seated on the saddle, again, trying to continuously put in, the same amount of wattage so we can compare against all the different motors. We've got a lot of different motors we're testing, so we'll see how this does. This is a pretty decent hill climb. It's not incredibly strenuous, but it's got some decent distance to it, decent elevation, and should be a great test to see what this motor can do. It is one of my favorite motors in terms of responsiveness, in terms of climbing. Let's put some data to that gut feeling that I have after riding this for such a long time. Okay, so I will say, again, my impressions on this motor have always been very, very positive, especially on the hill climb. It's very responsive, and it makes this climb kind of feel more like the flats. So I'll let you listen to it through this section, see if you can kind of hear it. So as you can tell, it's a very quiet motor, very responsive, and I have a feeling the data is going to show how powerful it is at the same time. So let's go check the tape and see how the Levo did.
On Hellhole, the Turbo Levo reached the top in 1 minute and 20 seconds, averaging 13.6 miles per hour. As of this filming, EMTBs on average complete the climb in 1 minute and 30 at 12.2 miles per hour. That also happens to be just a second behind the average of all of the e-bikes that we've tested there, for those who are wondering. Now, over on the water tower climb, the results were actually similar. It was 3 minutes 35 seconds to the top, averaging 14.5 miles per hour, and that edges out the current average of 3 minutes 39 seconds at 14.4 miles per hour. So the 2.2 motor performs above average, delivering noticeable bursts of power that make short climbs feel quick, while sustaining long, drawn-out ascents at a strong pace. Now, speed is a useful benchmark, but what really stands out is how intuitive and responsive the motor feels. And that's the part that we still geek out about the most. There really isn't a hill we can't trust this bike on. It has all of the peak power capabilities you'd need for any situation, but what sets it apart is how well it adapts to the terrain. It seems to sync effortlessly with the rider's needs, making climbs feel more natural and controlled rather than just brute forcing your way to the top.
Hey guys, welcome to the ride quality section of our review. It is 2025. And as you probably know, this bike we're reviewing is the the Specialized Gen 3 Levo. And this bike has been out now for about 4 years. And on kind of when the bike was released, it was just, I mean, it was all over the internet. Everybody was talking about how great it was. And I mean, there were reviewers even saying that, hey, it's not just the best e-bike, it's like the best bike, period. Regardless of what bike you ride, like, this is it. It's the best of all of them. So having said that, like, where does it stack up 4 years later? There's been a lot of changes in the EMTB space, and a lot of people, quite frankly, have kind of caught up to what Specialized did when they released this bike. So I will say this: when we talk about, you know, ride quality, there are a lot of aspects of the quality of a bike and how it handles and how it rides that are purely based on the component spec. And that's one of the unique things about, or one of the things that makes the Levo so unique, is that they offer this bike in, I want to say, like, I think 6 or 8 different specs. So, and it's funny because all of the bikes, they ride a little better, obviously, the more expensive you get, but they all have very similar ride qualities. They all have the same motor, which really is what makes the bike ride so well. It feels very natural, and then the app that comes with the motor is probably the best that I've used. It's very intuitive. You can adjust the bike to how you like the motor to feel, and now they've got this additional feature where you can preset your 3 modes. But then you also can do a micro tuning on the fly from through your thumb controller on the left, on the handlebars. So, you know, having the ability to do that really gives you the ability to tailor your ride. One of the things I think that makes this bike so great is the fact that it actually feels very similar to riding a normal bike. And I think, as far as ride quality goes, that's kind of the telltale sign of an e-bike or an e-mountain bike, is how close, how natural does it feel, both up the hill and down the hill. If it feels like you're just lugging around this massive weight, you know, it just starts to feel not very much fun. Woo! So, one of the things that I've loved about this bike is the fact that it feels as close to my regular bike as any e-bike that I've ridden. so good. So ride quality on this bike is second to none. Okay, so why do I say the ride quality is second to none? Well, it kind of comes down to a couple of factors. Number one is how accessible is this bike to the masses? Because there's one other bike that I think rides as good as this one, and that's the Pivot Shuttle AM, which we reviewed. And when I first got on that bike, I thought to myself, man, this might be better than the Levo. And at the end of the day, I think it might be, but that bike only comes in two price points, and they are both really high. So when you compare that to the accessibility and the ride quality that you get with the Levo, you know, in my opinion, as a guy that does not spend $15,000 on a bike, I would take the Levo 10 times out of 10 if I were spending my own money over the Pivot Shuttle AM. And again, not to knock the Pivot Shuttle AM, because like I said, it is as good, possibly better, depending on the terrain that you ride. Where we've tested it here in southern Utah, it's been absolutely amazing. So I want to go back to something else that I mentioned earlier, and that is that one of the reasons I think that this bike is the best is that it handles very, very close to what a regular bike or how a regular bike would handle. I've got quite a bit of experience pedaling long distances on cross-country bikes and on trail bikes and enduro bikes. I've ridden a lot on SL bikes as well, and all of those bikes have compromises. As a lot of you know that ride bikes a lot, anytime you give something a better, you know, anytime it's a better quality downhill, then you're most of the time sacrificing something on the uphill, or vice versa. I think that as far as a total package goes, the Levo, this bike, has the least amount of compromises of any bike on the market today. It's interesting. There's a lot of chatter right now about the next generation of this bike, the Generation 4 Specialized Levo. And I was reading through a couple of forums, and I saw this post that somebody had entered, and it just said, hey, you know what, I've been anxiously, patiently waiting the release of the Gen 4 Specialized Levo until I went out and rode my Gen 3 Levo yesterday, and I honestly can't think of a reason why to go out and buy a new bike, because this one is so good. And I can tell you that I've had a very similar experience riding the Gen 3 Levo. So going back to, hey, there's a lot of other bikes that have come out on the market, and a lot of them are really good. We got these new Bosch motors on newly designed bikes, and they're amazing. And they're making the market really competitive which at the end of the day for us consumers is only going to help as we, you know, look for better quality on our bikes. You know, one of the things that I hear with regards to e-mountain bikes is the idea that when you ride an e-bike that you're somehow cheating, right? It's the cheater bike. And I've done quite a bit of my own kind of just curiosity research, going out riding my regular bike with a heart rate monitor, and then riding my e-bike with heart rate monitor, and just comparing the data in all the different modes, like whether you're in like a light setting or trail or turbo. And it's really interesting because I think most people who ride e-bikes and have ridden them for a while can attest that once you get used to riding an e-bike, you end up going out on your ride and you pedal with the same effort almost regardless of the bike that you're on. Now, there's a caveat to that, and that is that on your regular bike, you'll get a lot more heart rate spikes. Of course, I mean, that's just the nature of mountain biking. You're up and down the mountain or wherever you're riding. You give more effort than less effort. And as you do that, your heart rate goes up, right? So that's one of the things that riding an e-bike, it just kind of, it levels that out. But what's interesting is the average heart rate on, and like for example, like let's just take an hour ride, your average heart rate is very similar. So you end up, you know, I heard it said once that if you're kind of a guy that just loves to smash and pedal hard, you're gonna do the same thing on an e-bike. Whether you're that guy that's kind of more of a easygoing, soft pedal guy, you're gonna do that on an e-bike. The thing is that on an e-bike, and this is what I found as I've ridden both for quite a while now, is that since I've had an e-bike, I just end up riding way more. Another part of ride quality, I think, is the ability to keep your bike rideable. And Specialized has been notorious for taking care of their stuff warranty-wise. They will go above and beyond. Now, of course, you'll find the occasional contradiction to that, but for the most part, they are really good. So they keep you riding, which I think probably is the best part.
So Bryce just shared most of our ride quality and value thoughts. I'll just summarize really quickly and add a couple of things on top. Riding an e-bike that doesn't feel like one is a magical sensation. It's no small compliment, and it's one of the reasons why we feel like novices and vets alike can appreciate this bike. The bike really is all mountain. We don't think it's truly out of place anywhere, from trail rides to downhill enduro. It's got something for everybody thanks to all of its adjustability with the flip chip. The geometry is just outstanding, and the wheelbase and chainstay length strike a perfect balance between stability and maneuverability, while the smaller 27.5-inch rear wheel makes the bike feel snappy and playful. You can carve through trails with ease, and the rear end responds effortlessly to every movement. The 150/160 suspension setup is another huge factor in the versatility as well. We could dial it in for a plush, forgiving feel over rough terrain, or stiffen it up for a more responsive and aggressive ride. The Fox suspension components work well, and we had virtually zero performance complaints, even though we wouldn't have said no to a Fox factory fork given the MSRP of the bike. Now, the stock tires roll fast and provide solid traction. Wider tires could further improve stability for enduro riders and offer better float on softer terrain. But as far as stock setups go, they performed really well. Just remember, this is a true mullet setup and can't be ridden as a 29er. The SRAM Kodar brakes on our bike have been great, but I'm pretty stoked about the upgrade that they've made to the Mavens. The power and modulation on those feel fantastic from what I've tested on some of my friends' bikes. As a final quality note, Specialized backs its products with a lifetime warranty on the frame and 2 years on the motor and battery. Their nationwide support network ensures easy access to servicing and repairs, adding peace of mind to an already well-rounded package. I think even the harshest Turbo Levo critics would say that you were only getting what you paid for on the Gen 3. And that still comes out as a positive, seeing as the premium price would at the very least be warranted. But for us, this feels like an incredible ride under any lens, whether you're scrutinizing its handling, its power, its versatility, or just the overall fun factor. It's a great ride by any measure. So let's go ahead and answer the question that we started out with. Should you snag the Gen 3 or hold out for what's next? To me, this is still easily one of the best EMTBs out there and still worth getting today. And if the Gen 4 does come out soon, it's gonna lower the price tag on this one and turn it into one of the best deals around. Even if it's a few years old, I mean, who cares? The motor is terrific, and while we're speaking marginally here, it's probably the best we've experienced in terms of combining power and natural feel. It's truly awesome, and it can be set up exactly how you would like it to respond. Again, the bike is surprisingly playful. Thanks to the high degree of adjustment with the flip chip and other adjustments you can make to the Geo, it can be a weapon on the downhill or a plush and easygoing trail ride. Do I think that the Gen 4 will be the better bike? I mean, probably, but likely just marginally so, as I don't see how you could drastically improve on what is already here. I don't think you're going to encounter much FOMO should you decide to go for the better deal. The Gen 3 is just a stellar bike that riders are going to thoroughly enjoy. That'll do it for this review. Let me know what further questions or comments you have about the Turbo Levo down in the comments section below. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe. I'm Griffin with Electric Bike Report, and I'll see you on the next ride.